Back to the Future 2030 to 2020. Standing here in India in 2030, it feels like the country has changed dramatically and for the better. In 2020, India stood at crossroads of making crucial choices about its path to the future development. With climate change looming, India's most significant challenges at the time included rapid, unplanned urbanization, scarcity of resources, malnutrition, high levels of poverty, and as well as severe gender and human right violations. In the country we are inhabiting, people are undergoing stress and breakdowns while adapting to new realities. Not all were equipped to handle the personal and social spheres changes and effectively respond to them. This made us realize that educating for change and preparing people for the future is as important as material changes. But these adversities also allowed India to leapfrog into a more just era. Today, we write to you about, about these adversities' results, which led to a better India compared to what it was in 2020. The boom in technology is now bigger than ever. Tech companies now not only focus on making their users' lives more comfortable, but also on being more environmental friendly. The biggest tech companies are all almost carbon neutral and are moving towards a carbon negative plan for 2035. Artificial intelligent agents now run factories, erstwhile workers now work on more humanitarian jobs. Data is now more secure and protected as privacy laws stand updated. On the web, you can now go incognito and not worry about your personal information still being tracked. Paying via digital currencies is now the new norm. We do not carry wallets or cards anymore. This has played a massive role in curbing corruption. Each transaction can be traced using blockchain. There are no foreign exchange rates on digital currency transactions. Even taxes are being paid via digital currencies. Further, citizens worldwide can now access unlimited internet at 8G speed, and the net carbon footprint left behind by each individual is now almost zero. More and more companies are now focused on climate technology, building solutions to go carbon negative are mushrooming.
Sustainable urban development and mobility for all. 70% of our buildings standing today were still to be constructed in 2020. The current demand for mobility and transportation was a third of what it was in 2020. In addressing these gaps, the principles of reusing, repurposing, and recycling played a crucial role. Conscious that we live in a world that is increasingly running out of natural resources, judicious use of resources is a key philosophy that is being increasingly leveraged by businesses, policymakers, and citizens alike. Renting out spaces, services, and transport for everyday use has become the norm. This has helped reduce dependency on limited resources. Electric vehicles are now much more common, cheaper, and accessible. It is easier to charge EVs because charging points are commonplace. People are purchasing fewer private vehicles and opt for public transport more often. Vehicles running on petroleum are still around, but they are less affordable to use and maintain now. Self driving public transport modes, such as cabs and buses, have also become popular in Indian cities. Artificial intelligence directly maps traffics and routes you onto the most efficient path automatically. India has become an emerging hub for manufacturing, such as vehicles, which leave behind reduced carbon footprints. Sourcing and disposing of batteries became a major challenge, but we are working on materials that retain their ability to hold electricity for longer. However, we now have reskilled people like auto mechanics and drivers whose jobs have become obsolete due to this change. Retrofitting vehicles with internal combustion engines has been piloted in several places. Roads are being laid using recycled materials and wastes instead of tar. Cities continue to grow large but are now organized into zones, reducing congestion and improving supply networks efficiency. Local communities have been encouraged to decide on the kind of traffic they want on their roads. As an experiment, we see many communities restricting heavy and motorized vehicles, only allowing for small EVs and bicycles, designating no vehicle streets, and free last mile public transportation for lower income groups. Carbon Old vehicle import and luxury taxes are being levied to fund the transition towards green vehicles, public transport, and public spaces. People have recognized the cultural relevance of roads, and they are now avenues for events such as pride parades. Several initiatives have encouraged people's participation in the management of roads, keeping them safe for all, including the elderly, women, non humans, and thereby genuinely making our streets for people.
I love this. Education for knowledge, not for degrees or titles. The focus of education has steadily turned towards gaining real world knowledge. Education is no longer just a rite of passage to secure degrees and jobs. Political literacy, legal literacy, and data literacy become part of the school curriculum. And the envisioned feminist curriculum is in practice. Children are encouraged to develop the sense that humanity merely occupies a place in the world we share with other species in the larger scheme of things. There is a focus on the outdoors, exploratory nature visits, and lab work. Children are now guided to understand the ecological impact of their choices. They are encouraged to explore, define, and solve local problems that are a consequence of climate change. Unschooling and homeschooling are being picked over traditional forms of education. In time, a growing number of Indian origin scholars stepped back into India to participate in the growth story that the country became, fueling technological advances, which fueled multifaceted development.
All right, here we go. Um, just governance and human rights take giant strides forward. Am I audible? Is that okay? Yeah. Can
Yes,
you
you
hear
are.
me? All right. So just governance and human rights take giant strides forward. Indian democracy grew more robust post 2020, and few countries enacted as many pro-democratic reforms as India. The two-party duopoly did not read the signs around them, and civil groups steadily campaigned for checks and balances in the electoral process, and not just at the Lok Sabha and the Vidhan Sabha level, but rather at all levels down to the Gram Panchayat. And these civil groups catalyzed reforms whereby independents could contest elections and hold public office without fear, with the aid of police security. Such security is also afforded to elected independents after their tenure at the office. And then there's a notable shift in power from central and state governments towards municipalities and gram panchayats, where elected office bearers could autonomously make governance decisions. All right. And almost simultaneously came a far reaching change to the contemporary values Indians held dear. The omnipresent corruption of the past culminated in a moral revolution, recognizing that they were the subject to a reign of polarizing politics. India's people, especially young Indians, actively outvoted separatists. While aiming for inclusive societies, people realized that ideologies, institutions, and practices should not be associated with religions. Ideologists stoking communal disharmony lost much of their influence. Mainstream media and publishing houses routinely showed ideas and stories of moderate values in high esteem. As a result, in places of parochial values, the notion of tolerant coexistence gained massive currency. Caste caste had no place at home, the workplace, or society at large. People have begun to see others as individuals with every right to take on religious, gender, sexual, occupational, political, and in general, any social identity they think appropriate. Freedom of religion is well respected. There are no outcries of love jihad when a person marries another of a different faith. Missionary movements continue to exist, but vulnerable groups are not targeted. So there's vigorous enforcement of laws against forced conversion and malicious opposition towards voluntary conversion. There's dignity in labor. People appreciate that other individuals help fix a problem they would otherwise be struggling with. And the practice of manual scavenging has no place in contemporary Indian society. And the sense to treat information transmitted by media outlets, mainly social media outlets, with skepticism prevails very strongly. This, in turn, has played a key role in keeping divisive politics at bay. Animal rights have become a part of mainstream social justice movements, and the political discourses are not devoid of recognizing animal rights and sentient, maybe sentient beings. Yeah.
Inclusive economic development. On the economic front, India took a series of measures that boosted per capita GDP and reduced income inequality. Broad adoption of permaculture helped the primary sector remain resilient to climate change. A notable shift in food demand towards plant based produce helped reduce the country's carbon footprint. Urban farming in citizens' homes has boosted agriculture production and helped meet the exponential growth in food demand. Clean energy wins that Tamil Nadu saw pre 2020 blazed the trail of for other states, driving down India's carbon dependency. We now witness Gandhi's resurgence and several Gandhian principles, namely production efficiency, sufficiency in consumption, and what he could well have called conservancy of resources and deficiency in wastes. Particularly in terms of food and energy production, India has organized itself into self sustaining, interconnected communities. Each such community now comprises about 25 houses and has solar, biomass, and wind based power generators to produce energy locally. The energy thus produced adequately meets domestic demand and that of local shops and other recreational spaces within the community. Several investments in engineering, infrastructure, especially in rural parts, and textiles created new jobs in design, communication, and outreach, thus boosting demand despite the advent of AI, artificial intelligence, that took over several manual jobs. With peaceful international relationships come sustained surges in trade. In the services sector, India continues to be an IT leader. India's healthcare is more focused on healthy living and wellness, where different systems of health and medicine complement each other. Our mortality and morbidity indicators have shown a drastic decline in the past decade, making India's health indicators comparable with those of developed countries. Both communicable and non communicable diseases have almost disappeared, with people across all ages and socioeconomic categories adapting healthy lifestyles. We now have enough beds and trained and skilled healthcare professionals to address the needs of those requiring hospitalization. The healthcare sector grew several folds. India now has the most number of hospital beds per capita than any other country in the world. Both classical and contemporary Indian culture continue to influence the world, and consequently, sustainable tourism and entertainment export flourished. Progressive taxation helped develop a social security net for the underprivileged. Fundamental freedoms such as food, water, housing, education, and healthcare could finally be afforded to every citizen. Further, several government services ended up getting digitized in the wake and aftermath of the COVID 2019 pandemic. This deterred corruption and brought in much needed trust in institutions. Working from home, or you can say remote working, is commonplace and allows family members to spend more time at home and divide domestic responsibilities more equitably across genders. Thank you.
gender justice at long last. I'm happy to report that women's representation in all walks of life is almost 50%. Professional colleges, political parties, and even corporations have more women at top level positions than ever before. Gender fluidity is tolerated, as are all sexual orientations. Discriminatory practices and hate crimes are severely punishable offenses. A sizable population now identifies with genders and sexual orientations that were uncommon in public in 2020. Post COVID-19, men started sharing the responsibilities of managing homes. A series of wildly successful viral films and popular music played a significant role in shaming the perpetrators of domestic violence to a point where neighbors and relatives played a substantial role in helping women tortured by their husbands and in-laws. The right to an equal share of inheritance has been enforced even more strongly, which has helped women get an equal voice in their marriage. The shift probably accidental because, at last, men and boys are also included in the conversation on gender justice. Content emphasizing equal roles for all sexes as part of school curriculum is given as much weightage as any other subject in the curriculum. Workplaces are considered backward and closed-minded unless their workforces have fair representation of alternately abled, LGBTQ persons, and women. We are not 100% there, but are slowly and surely getting to a point where a person's gender will not determine the chances of success or failure in their careers, their general well-being, or their acceptance of their choices. In addition to household chores and childcare, emotional labor is also shared by men. Household work and home management are valued as economic contributions and compensated in monetary terms. And participation in this is no longer a matter of convenience for men. The concept of family is redefined after recognizing same-sex marriages in India, and one can avail of ration and other social benefits.
Medical advances in accessible healthcare further improve the quality of life. Far fewer people wear spectacles. I came across a stretching club where 90 years old were the main participants. That's something. Psychiatric conditions such as bipolar disorder, anxiety, depression, and developmental disorders such as autism are not typical and certainly not life altering. Preventive practices such as meditation and mindfulness and non invasive methods of diagnosing irregular brain waves help treat issues. Stem cell therapies are routinely offered. Even district level health centers offer some form of organ replacement options. For example, livers can be regrown in about 6 to 7 months. Previously, livers were harvested, ex situ, cultured in sterile labs. But now, liver stem cells are seeded in the patient's body from day zero. Yes, and without surgery. Advances in genetics have made cancer treatment much more effective than in the past. Surgery nowadays mostly requires minimally invasive micro keyhole openings, and patients are almost always conscious during the procedure. In addition to accessible healthcare facilities, there is an awareness that personal care is not just about the individual, but also the community and the collective. Instead of individual behavior modification and therapy, people explored practices to collectively remedy the systems causing them harm. Simultaneously, as these medical advances have come to be, healthcare facilities and services are now accessible to citizens of all socioeconomic groups.
Culture creation, literature, visual arts, music, and performing arts. If VR was the most exciting thing to happen in 2020, then UR, ultra reality, is what the artists are talking about. Performances of a hybrid fusion of painting and light art are held as street art on city corners. Street squares are the new art galleries. Some of them are rendered with the most luminous, intense effects that 2020 couldn't have conceived of. Also, the scale and size of civic art have expanded. Imposing images of the scale of trees are projected with the dynamism provided by electronic media. All this is temporary. It can be created and dissolved at will without impeding pedestrian and vehicular movement. As for music, compositions are created on the spur of the moment with an ensemble of real and virtual instruments. Soloists have been replaced by artist groups who come together and make instant music, not the practiced premeditated studio releases of the previous decade. The sound and melody effects have kept pace with the technology used to create them. Outdoor stereo projections of sound are the norm, providing listeners immersive experiences of theatrical quality, appearing as distant background accompaniment to instruments nearby. Film industries have stopped objectifying women and sexist cultures no longer acceptable, reflecting the changes in society's value system. The music concert halls of the Margari festival in Tamil Nadu are filled with Dalit Carnatic singers and musicians.
Security, terrorism, and conflicts. The pervasive presence of cyber terrorists is a new threat as they appear to have followed pace with the blockchain advancements. There was a severe security breach in the quantum computers of one of the few corporations with the expertise to process climate data. Cyber stalkers have had unauthorized access to carbon and hydrogen trading data, with implications for malicious manipulation of carbon economies. Surviving these wars of 2030 are the challenges which nations are addressing. Accountability of third parties, countries, corporations, and systems with global impact is the weakest link here. Some belligerents have created tensions in international relations by manipulating climate data that tracks the Arctic ice melt. It would have seemed that conventional wars were a thing of the past when Asian countries ventured towards a geopolitical unification of Southeast Asian nations as a strategy to counter climate change. There exists an African Union too. There was substantial disapproval from anti-unifactionists, breakaway factions whose means were not always without violence against the state. These groups are believed to have a hand in subverting the climate accords between countries, fortunately with limited effect. Thanks.
Thank you, Nita. So I'm going to take the liberty to just end this in every sense of that term. The end. So there we are after time travel back to the future, right up to 2030 and back again. In 2020, a bunch of dreamers paused in the middle of a pandemic to make this time capsule in anticipation of a promise of a not too distant future after an era of unprecedented challenges. Having encountered a century preceding this as a time of heroic human endeavors and terrible ecological damage in its wake, it was a pause point to review the graph of human progress, apply course correction measures, and persist with the ideals of mutual peace, harmony with nature, and equity. We leave it to the finders of this time capsule, who live in better times, to judge how close to reality these hopes and predictions turn out to be. From the wicked minds of 2020. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Thank you, everybody. This was lovely, and it has been a pleasure throughout these last 8 weeks. So now comes the time to wrap up this course. There are a few things that I want to say. The first is, what can you do to make this vision a reality? I think that's the most important thing. So there are several projects that you may want to participate in. There are things that you can do with your friends, your colleagues. So I'm going to mention 2 or 3 things that we are ourselves initiating, and then there will also be a brief presentation about what strikes me as a very exciting new project by Alpana and Tarni, and then we'll quit. So there are 2 or 3 things that I want to mention about what Socrates itself is doing. So we are going to take up this Green Up project in 2 different places. One is in the northeast of India. And so if you have a connection with the Northeast, if you want to understand how we can imagine the future of the Northeast as a flourishing society, exactly in the way that we have done for all of India, but with much more detail, then that's something that you're welcome to participate in. If you're interested, just send me an email. At the other end, we again want to take up a single ward in the city of Bangalore, Yashwantpur, the ward of Yashwantpur, and create a full stack understanding of Yashwantpur. So the idea is everything from governance to data to livelihoods will be co-imagined, and we have wonderful partners, some of whom have been participating in this seminar itself. So that's the second thing that I want to mention as as things that you can be involved in going forward from here. I'm going to now hand it over to Tarini and Alpana. Actually, I think Alpana is going to be making that presentation. So why don't you take it over from here? Feel free to share your screen. So while we are waiting for them, I just want to say this is a great idea to imagine a form of storytelling for children as a way to bring the future of India in the era of climate change.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Not yet. Tarini, you may want to share your screen instead. Oh yeah, now you're the co-host. You should be able to do it. Can you try again, Alpana?
Can you see it now?
Nope.
Okay, I'll share. You come on video.
Mm-hmm.
Just give me 1 second.
So while that's happening, let me give you a little background. So when we were, when you had your, yes.
All yours, Alpana.
So I think, surely, I hope everybody agrees. Nobody cares about climate change unless it impacts them immediately and personally. This does not really apply to our group, but then this is the, if you surveyed the general population, this is what we will come up with. So next slide. Currently, climate change is speaking to the already converted. While awareness about climate change is high, people's knowledge is not being converted into appropriate action at any point on the spectrum of personal to political. So if we were to go into, analysis of the target groups that we should be speaking to, who are, the ones who could lead change, the type of people we would be talking to are, next slide. Okay. So there is Arjun, Akriti and Shamita, 27 to 33-year-old. They attended public schools, fancy colleges. They work in huge offices in Gurgaon. They are affluent. They work in MNCs. Their weekdays are spent in office. Weekends are relaxing by partying and shopping. They believe that till age 50 or something, they will concentrate on earning well. And then after that, they will give back to society. The education has given them awareness about climate change, but they're not ready to do anything for it right now because, they have other ambitions. Then you have Kailash Chand, Seetal Rastogi, Ravi Shankar Azad of Chhattisgarh, between 35 and 45 years old. They live in Bilaspur and work at the High Court. For them, clearing out the forest and removing native trees and replacing them with palms and other ornamental plants is a sign of progress. They're so proud that they are moving away from their roots and working their way towards modernizing their state. They believe this is the best way forward, and anything else will be a compromise and a disappointment. Their concept of development is very different from what climate change activists are saying. Then we have someone like Shankar, Vandana and Anshuman, based in Mumbai, originally from Chikmagalur, Almora, Bhilai, small town, married with each one of them would probably have 2 children below 5 years. They pay exorbitant EMIs for their homes, for their cars, for the material comforts. Their material comforts have become necessities because they hardly have time away from their careers. The environment and climate change briefly occupies their thoughts when they're wading through Mumbai annual monsoon floods. This is the general sort of, I've tried to give you an idea of, the kind of people who could actually bring about change by changing their lifestyles, but they are not going to be able, we are not right now reaching out to these people. And even if we are, they are not listening to us. Okay, next slide, please. Our behavior and political affiliations are not decided by who is doing anything for the climate and who is not. So we're not going to vote for someone just because they're, doing something about the climate change. And a politician knows that if he has to invest in this idea of, climate change, it's not going to give him extra votes. Yes, it's getting hotter in summer. Let's just crank up the air conditioning. If it's colder this winter, let's buy a new heater. The bigger picture is there in the back of their minds, but they have to keep their jobs and pay their bills. Next slide. So what is common amongst all these people, this group of people that we have just sort of seen? What they all have in common is the contents of their textbooks when they were in school. So in social studies, they had to learn up lists of how many thermal power plants exist in the country, when and where were the biggest dams built, and which states are rich in minerals and metals. Nowhere did they read about the impact of extracting these minerals. Nobody told them about the displaced native populations or the environmental impact of buying the 25th cotton shirt or pulling up acres and acres of native trees to replace them with buildings and ornamental plants. Even if they learned it, their lives couldn't accommodate grand ideas of public consciousness. They are preconditioned to think of development as completely opposed to what the planet needs. Next slide. The other common ground is popular culture. It's the stories they read, the TV shows they watch, the films they see, and the songs they hear and sing. And nowhere in this popular culture are issues like environment and climate change given importance or even a mention. Next. You're not going to see a Bollywood film talking about climate change. Their behavior and political affiliations are also not decided by who is doing anything for the climate and who is not. If love and respect for the environment is to be cultivated and nurtured, we need to enter their mindset in their early years, when they're still forming their ideas. So before we go into the idea, let's talk about some insights that we culled from various places. Despite all the noise and hype on climate change and environmental issues, the alarm bells have not permeated into popular culture, which I've already mentioned. Then come next. School textbooks have not been reviewed to include climate change into the curriculum in an organic way. If company X has a carbon footprint of ABC metric tons and a company Y has carbon footprint of DEF metric tons, calculate the percentage. In a maths class, those problem sums don't include these kind of issues. Instead of learning about where are the thermal power plants and which state has highest level of bauxite, a chapter on cities with the best air and water management and policies that work the world over are not mentioned. This is not part of the curriculum. It has not seen the light of day yet. So we move to next. Political will tends to lean towards issues that get votes. Caste, gender, religion have taken the front seat. Even progress and development are evaluated with that lens. So the idea is let's reach out to diverse urban and regional demographics when they are at an impressionable stage of life. So now you meet Aryan, Ahana, and Vanshika, an investment banker, a lawyer, and software engineer in the making. They are all of 4 or 5 years old, and their parents have already invested in mutual funds and term deposits for their future tuitions, special classes, and college fees. Next. Let's talk to them before we lose them to the world of unchecked commerce, marketing, and advertising. Advertising, a part of industry which I was. It's not a bad industry. Anyway, next slide. Let's introduce them to the wondrous world of stories. Let's make sure that for them, the big bad wolf is the one who chops off trees, and the wicked witch is the one who makes farmers burn stubble to ruin the air. For them, I think what should happen is Cinderella is the one who turns her back on a closet full of stuff she does not need. And Snow White is teaching the dwarves all about organic farming. You get the gist of what I'm trying to say. Let their heroes and their stories have essence of climate change, and let that be an integral part of the stories they hear. Next slide. We collaborate with the best minds. How do we go about it? It's easier said than done, of course. So we collaborate with the best minds in the industry. We're talking about environmentalists, artists, writers, to write and publish children's stories that are full of fantasy and magic, adventure, action, mystery, tragedy, love, and the inevitable climax after which everyone lives happily ever after. We don't want to preach, we are not prudes, but at the heart of every story is the underlying message of managing climate change and examining values that demand high growth-based industrial development versus collective and ecologically sensitive ideas of success. I think we'll come to the last slide now. So the process will include having writer workshops. It can be an online workshop, it can be a workshop, location based, where we take the writers through a process, and at the end of the workshop, each person has come up with their own story, which we can tie up with publishers, we can tie up with organizations like Pratham, who have this wonderful storytelling portal. Then we can explore podcasts, blogs, vlogs for children. Right now, they probably listen to Wheels of the Bus and things like that. Let them hear other interesting stories, in which organically we mention climate change and responsible ways of living. Working with writers from communities that have faced ecological losses. Someone who was displaced when a dam was built or a forest was cleared. I'm sure they have stories over there which would interest children. So because there's no connect for a child living in a city who will one day grow up to be a thought leader or a change maker, if they have not connected with these stories, if they've not connected with these kind of narratives, that sympathy, empathy is not going to come. And then again, once again, that entire cycle of wrong decisions being made will happen. So I think this would be a very important sort of fact, part of all the stories. We should be working with filmmakers to produce short and effective animation films. Okay. To broaden, deepen, and strengthen the narrative that development does not have to be at the cost of environment, that losses don't need to be inevitable, and that the next decades are crucial to our collective futures. I think that's it. And
thank you, Alpana. That was lovely. And I feel like there's an open space up there for us to co-imagine this together. Again, if there are people who in this group, so I'll definitely be sending these out via email and in the newsletter, so you don't have to respond to it now necessarily. But I do think that creating this kind of curriculum, but not through, you could say, instruction, but through storytelling, is a fantastically inspiring process in my view. So
it's a huge challenge
if
also,
some,
but yeah.
yeah, yeah. But I think that in our networks, there are people with the right skill sets. So this is the time to bring everybody together. Does somebody want to add to that? Any thoughts in response to Alpana? Okay. Again, as I said, you'll get an opportunity to respond and imagine via email as well. So I'm going to end with a couple of requests from you. The first is, as you know, this course was offered, and I think we will do this for our future courses as well. There was no fee associated with it. There was no, we don't expect anything from you for this. But as you know, this has been a very difficult year for lots and lots of people. And so one of the things that we are suggesting is if you have, so I'm going to share some of my screen in a sec. And so if you think that this course did something for you, or you anyway have some extra income that you can contribute, we would very much appreciate it if you chose a charity of your own, or we have ourselves created something called Ekorek, which is a charity where whatever you contribute will go to migrant laborers and others who are in need as a result of the corona crisis, right? So what I suggest is pick a number that you are comfortable with and contribute that number either to Ekorek. I mean, you don't have to do it here. It's entirely up to you, but just pick a number, find a charity, and give them that money. And that would be your contribution for this course. So we don't need it, but I think they do. And it would be lovely if you could do so. Yeah. So that's the first thing. Again, you can reach out to me personally if you want to do this. If you want to learn more about Ekorek, feel free to contact us. Or if you want to learn, if you know some other group that's acting in, in the interests of migrant laborers and others, feel free to give it to them too. So that's the first pitch on my part. The second thing is, of course, that this course is ending and we want to keep the community going. And in fact, we want to increase the community. So the second, therefore, request I have is the newsletter is the primary sort of community gathering space. So I request all of you, if this course was useful and you want to keep this momentum going, each one of you should bring in 10 new people to the newsletter, right? That is the second request I have. So craft an email. I'm happy to craft that email, but find as many people in your networks who might be interested in this co-imagination process and bring them to the newsletter. In a few months, when we run the course again, then they will be right there to learn what's happening in the course as a result of the newsletter. Okay, so that's the second thing I wanted to share. The final, so Tarini, can you go ahead and share? I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Tarini, do you want to talk about the feedback form?
Yes, I will be sharing a link with you, which has a series of questions just to gauge your basic feedback on the entire 8 sessions. And it'll be great to hear from everybody about, it'll give you a chance to just reflect on the sessions you had, and please let us know what worked, what didn't, what you think we could kind of work on, since we hope to do this again. I'll just put the link in the chat box.
Okay. So that's it. All good things come to an end. We are riding into the sunset, or whatever happens in future VR worlds. But all good things must come to an end. And I want to thank you all again for this lovely 8 weeks that we have spent together. I hope you'll join us in the future. Yeah. So how do you take part in the project in Bangalore? So I will send an email about all of this separately. So it's, have a lovely and relaxing end of the year. I'm waiting for Tarini to paste in the link to the feedback form in the chat window, and then we'll all quit. All right,
Thank you,
so
Rajesh,
there
for all
is
of the
the
sessions as well. It's been great. I'm sure everyone agrees.
well, thank you. Okay, so maybe we all come back on video and say bye, and then we say bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Happy holidays.
Happy New Year. Bye.
All right, Tarini and Ram, I think it's time for us to say bye as well. Tarini, I think it would be great if we can have the edited readout of all the sections, right? So if there's a way to just cut out the individual, so for example, for each session, like the video of that person reading it. And so the last newsletter I want to send this year will just be the text of the letter with the videos on top of them.
Okay.
Right. So what I mean is section.
They didn't all come on video, did they?
Yes, I think so. I mean, it was recorded from the beginning, I think. So.
It was recorded. I don't know if they all turned their video on. Some might.
No, I don't mean like, I mean, it'll at least be audio.
Then, yeah. Okay, sure. I'll share that with you as soon as possible.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Ram, I see that you are in somewhere in Mysore, I guess.
Yeah, I haven't found the right spots in this house for internet, but yeah.
Hey, that went well.
Finished the first Academy as a